how do you make sure that the benefit and the costs align? Because, I mean...
Yeah. So you have to assume that you are on the same... You mean in terms of whether you're the same metric?
Yeah, because, I mean, finding the rock doesn't make me 18 gasoline happy.
Yeah, exactly. So in the case of net benefit is what it is. It assumes, and that's the primary assumption of net benefit, is that you're on the same currency. Of course, you can, as I was talking about, have gas as a separate metric, and then try to find the best reward within having that metric, and that's actually called the resource-constrained net benefit problem. So that's a defined problem.
But you're not considering the fuel as also something of benefit, so it's not some sort of Pareto thing that you get at.
Well, you could also find a Pareto set if you have two metrics. You can look at a Pareto set. So look at Pareto domination and find a set of plans that a user can choose from if that's what you need.
General question. I just looking through this. Are all of these available?
Yeah, they will be available online. I just need to add a few.
What's the question?
I'm sorry. I mean the planners.
The planners. Sorry. Yes, many of them are. Most of them are. And I'm sure if you email any authors where you can't find the planners, you can probably get them. Almost everyone usually sends you a planner if they've used it for research purposes. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Is there some sort of a phase transition going on in terms of benefit versus cost? So I could imagine if you set up the distribution of cost and benefit in such a way that doing nothing is the best thing to do. If everything costs and the benefit is not enough to offset the cost, I could imagine the most intelligent plan is like do nothing at all. And that's probably just like a stat solver. When the ratio is too high, then it's completely unsolvable. You don't even need bar to search. And somewhat the phase. So of course there are other end of the spectrum. So can you make any general observational guidance about how to make PSP plan interesting to solve? So that's not reducing to some kind of trivial problems. Any guidelines?
Yeah, I mean you. So what people typically have done is they have a problem already that they know has this issue. They know that they have a set of goals that can't be where the balance is correct, right? So and it's a kind of a tricky thing. So if you're going to create a net benefit problem, you need to think about exactly what your currency is. So you have to think and sort of the scale of your currency, right? So you have to give enough reward that it balances the cost that you think it will take to reach this reward, to reach these goals. So it is a tricky thing, and oftentimes, you would need to fiddle around with this or find a very nice structure to the problem so that you can figure out sort of the minimum cost, maximum cost, and so you can create a reward that goes along with what you want in terms of your preferences on goals.
I guess this is less of an issue for problems coming from React. I already have this problem. I know it's going to create an interesting trade-off.
Yeah.
It's probably more of an issue for synthetic problem that you create by some random seeds and you want to.
Right.
And a lot of times are created, from random seeds.
Especially when you're creating benchmarks.
Yeah, that's right.
And so that's a problem for
And I wonder if in Semantics there's this ratio of clauses versus variables. It's kind of very revealing. It's not one thing cover all, but a very revealing feature of the problem. So do you have something similar to that? I would be very interested to something similar to that.
So within for just the classical planning, Rintanen did some work, and that itself is very little. Only he actually looked at whether there is a possibility of phase transition. For net benefit, really nobody did, as far as I know. I clearly agree with you that we do. There are cases where we won't even bother trying to solve the problem. And so in fact, in general, one of the interesting things about any of these things, net benefit problem, is not doing anything is a valid plan. It's just a low quality but valid plan. In some sense, for normal planning, not doing anything is never an option unless the goals are already satisfied. So this is very much within the realm, and sometimes it's actually, as you said, is the right plan, and we do that. I mean, sometimes when if the distance is high enough between the cost and the benefits, we just give up. But as to whether there is a small window in some interesting parameters where the problems become interesting, that's definitely what, I believe that's definitely what looking into, but I don't know anybody who's done it. Even for just classical planning, only Linton did a little amount of work on that. And
probably for next ITAP challenge paper.
Possibly.
Do these include information acquisition operators, or is that not? He's not included because
that's not really. I mean, it's kind of an extensive classical planning where acquisition of objects and facts, other than just simply having a full closed world where you know everything up front, isn't really included in any of the techniques that at least I don't know.
Just a quick nomenclature question. So when we say oversubscription planning, are we just talking about resource constraint and benefit planning?
Well, it's kind of an interesting question because it's oversubscription. I think it can be used some sort of in an overloaded way, but when we're talking about it, yes, that's what we mean.
No, but I mean, I think you're talking about when Dave Smith came up with the name oversubscription planning, and he did not actually say that resources are in a different currency from rewards. Although he did say that's a very useful class of problems to look at. And overall, I don't know that. I mean, I think the terminology. It's not necessarily meant to be just resource constraint. I think.
And are they both equivalent paradigms? I mean, they look very close, but
the terms you mean?
The resource constraint, net benefit, and partial satisfaction.
So I think, in my mind, I'm not sure. Jay might have some different view, but in my mind, the resource constraint net benefit is giving you a way of dealing with this different currencies problem. In general, whenever there are different currencies, right, it becomes a multi-objective optimization. In one case, you can use one of them as a hard constraint and find the best. So it becomes a single objective optimization problem with respect to a hard constraint on the.
And still a soft constraint. You're optimizing the net benefit.
I know, but the costs don't get combined with the rewards.
Right.
The costs don't get combined with the rewards. So actually, nobody, as far as I know, nobody who's done work under the umbrella of net benefit has actually. There are no planners that use that the extra separation of resource constraints from rewards. Although it makes a lot of sense to separate them. In some cases, there is no obvious way of combining the currencies.
I mean, Nico, Milo, and Ronan have done that in the stochastic planning paradigm.
Okay.
And we called it probabilistic oversubscription planning at that time, but
I think the terms oversubscription partial satisfaction has sort of been used, synonymously. I think that the bigger issue is essentially the kinds of preferences and the qualitative, quantitative.
Another question. Sorry. So this is obviously a very interesting problem, important problem, and I guess another equally important problem in planning is for those problems we don't even know how to find a valid plan. Given no profit at all, you just give me any plan, I'll be super happy. And it seems this is a harder problem, and if we are already at the first roadblock, and seems this may not be the kind of helpful in terms of finding a first legitimate plan at all. And I don't completely agree with it, because I think you can still use some of the techniques described here to guide the planner to solve the first problem, to find how to find a legal plan. In the absence of any preference at all, do you see a connection there? Because then you can make a strong argument. This is not solving just a PSP problem, but we are feeding towards an even more basic problem. Find a legal plan at all.
Well, yeah. I mean, one thing is that the goals are soft, and so in fact, if they're all soft, it's really easy to find a plan because the first plan is the null plan, and you don't have to. You don't have to do anything. And so, in terms of just finding, I mean, I think what you're saying is that I think you're asking why are we doing this?
No, I think you can make a stronger connection. Because what if all the goals are hard, for example, right? Because in the classical sense, all the goals are hard. If you miss one goal, you cannot say, "Hey, I found a legitimate plan. This is just a validation will just kick you out," right? But I feel like can some of the search control not a technique, because preference is really providing guidance through the search space.
I see.
Can that feed to the
yes.
all hard constraints case, like all hard goal case?
So one way, that's a good question. So one way to think of this is that you can, if you give reward to each goal, you can actually greedily select the goals so that you're trying to sort of solve them in a serial way.
Have a goal agenda, go achieve.
Exactly, solve this one and this one. And so in some sense, you're right. You can use this sort of preferences to order which one is more important in a greedy sense, and then guide search in this way. But of course, that's not going to give you the best plan necessarily. But it can help you find just a plan because you know you're focusing. You can look at them almost like landmarks. You're focusing on this first and then this next and such.
So that naturally suggests an anytime sort of an algorithm where you greedily pick a subset of goals and then you want to improve the subset of goals. And have people thought of that?
Actually, Sparks did it that way. I mean, several of the original direct net benefit planners did that, anytime.
Yes, yeah.
And actually, in response to another question that came up earlier, the way Jay presented the planners was different. I mean, like he first presented the compilation approaches and then presented the direct net benefit. But chronologically, it was the opposite. First people tried direct net benefit and then tried compilation. In some sense, actually, the underlying planners became fast enough that people started thinking that maybe it's worth trying compilation only recently. So it's and in general, the question as to whether you should look for a special approach versus compilation approach is a fraught with all sort of interesting issues. So in particular, I think one thing that I believe, and I have no obvious way of establishing this, is to the extent there's a lot of structure in the preferences, when you compile them, it becomes an issue of if you need to explain, for example, why you pick certain objectives as against another objectives, having some connection to the original preferences would help. And at least this is sort of what happens in planning versus compiling planning into SAT versus directly planning too. But if I give you the problem, and if they're especially as just additive reward problems, I think compilation seems to be interesting approach right now because the underlying planners have been going fast enough.
Also regarding what Trong said, I think if you look not at net benefit but maybe constraints on paths or preferences on paths, then you can use that to do some pruning or
I
ordering.
think that's all what putting that can be part of it.
So that might help.
Okay, you go for the second part.
Okay, that's good now. That's good. Thanks.
Okay, so I'll be talking about 3 different things now. I have a lot of slides, probably even more than Jay had, and Raul said that I can speak really fast, which is not really true. Not even in my own native language I can speak fast. So what we're going to do here is review a bunch of different alternatives to express preferences on plans. The first type of preferences we're going to talk about have to do with trajectory constraints. Already Rao explained a little bit about that. The nice thing, one of the nice things that I think this PDL3 language has is that it's thought in a way that it's designed in a way such that the users will be able to write their own preferences in a way that is quite independent from the way that the designer of the planning problem has designed the predicates of the domain. Okay, so here in PDL3, we're sort of thinking that the user is someone who actually uses the system, the planning system, and the designer sort of has encoded the planning domain somehow. Okay, that is something that you could still do with partial satisfaction problems, but we'll see here that we can actually enforce certain constraints that may not, you could do it in a partial satisfaction way, but in PDL3 it's going to be somewhat easier. Well, probably the point is not very clear now. Anyway, so as Jay already went through this, partial satisfaction problem allows you to specify sub-goals and where action have costs. But there are many things that in partial satisfaction planning you cannot easily say. At least you cannot say with the predicates that are supplied by the designer, as I was trying to say before. So, for example, events that occur during the execution of a plan. So imagine that you're planning a travel and you have hard goals about, visiting Atlanta and then maybe going to some other city in the US and then going back home. And then you may have a soft goal about doing something in between the plan, in between these goals that you want to satisfy. For example, it would be great to schedule a museum visit or a visit to the aquarium, for example. That's something that you would like your plan to satisfy somewhat in the middle, okay?
Why is it different than the soft goals of PSP?
Oh,
why is it not just another soft goal?
Okay, it could be another soft goal, but in there you would usually that will depend a lot on how the domain is described. Okay, so for example, if you have a predicate that specifies your location, for example, you would say, well, in the planning domain, you have this predicate that at position yourself, which is changing when you're performing actions. When you can, something you could try to do is saying, well, I want to be at the museum at the end of the plan. It's one. I mean, you would need to have a special predicate that tells you if you have visited a museum at a specific point, and the designer may have not included that predicate in the domain. Okay, so that's the point. Okay, so how do you do that? We'll see in a while how you do that. Temporal relationship between those events. For example, I want to eat and see a movie, but I prefer to eat first. Okay, so I want to satisfy these two things, but I have preference on the order in which I want to satisfy them. Okay, and hard goals combines with soft goals. Someone was mentioning hard goals before. PDL3 will allow you to do these things. So I'll give a brief overview of PDL3, which can be viewed as an extension to partial satisfaction planning, and I'll show existing techniques for planning with PDL3. Okay? So I'll go over all these topics, trajectory constraints. I'll talk about this, about a little bit about the competition, then about this planner, HPlanP, which actually solves the problem by compiling away the temporally extended preferences. The temporally extended preferences talk about these things that happen during the execution of the plan. These two planners also compile away temporally extended preferences. I'll probably not go over much of details here because I think Jay has covered them quite, in a bit of detail. So, and then finalize talking about some what all these compilation approaches basically imply. What Jay has said before and what I'm going to say here means that basically you can actually plan for PDL3 preferences using a code-based planner like Llama, for example. I'm going to finish with that. Okay, so PDL3 was developed by the organizers of the 2006 planning competition. It's an extension of a PDL 2.1 language, PDL 2.1. For those of you who are not familiar with PDL, PDL is the standard language that is used in competition, so this is just one of its versions. It allows soft and hard trajectory constraints, conditional costs via precondition preferences, and quality of the plan is measured with a metric function. So this is very similar to what Jay already mentioned, and this actually means that this language is a quantitative language for specifying preferences. Okay. Okay. So in PDL, you specify the domain in a domain file, the problem in a problem file. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but for those of you who are not familiar, this is how you specify a domain. There's an action here that takes some parameters, has preconditions, and has effects. I'm not going to go into more details. Okay, so on top, so this is the standard way of expressing domains. You have a bunch of actions, and in your problem, you have an initial state and a final state. Okay, what PDL does is that it adds this, it uses this new. I'm not sure it's that new. This construct constraints where you actually express the things that you would like your plan to satisfy in a way. PDL3, in PDL3, a sub-constraint is denoted by the keyword preference. And I didn't want to call these things preferences because I don't believe that the word is actually used correctly here. So in PDL3 jargon, a preference is just a formula that may or may not hold in a plan. And more than specifying your preference, because when you say something is a preference, you're talking about preferring something to something else, comparing two things. This is actually more like a desire, something that you desire. Okay, and then sub-goals may be declared in the goal section, just as a regular goal, but there's sub-goals. So this is how things look like in a PDL3 representation. You have these preferences that are actually more like desires, and you are allowed to express these temporally extended constraints. So temporally extended constraints talk about events that happen during the execution of the plan. Okay, so here, sometime after this means that sometime after this formula holds, then you want this other formula to hold. Okay, so sometime after I've been holding something some x that is heavy, then I want to be at a recharging station. Okay, something reasonable, right? And so in the declaration, you use the word preference, the word cautious here. The word cautious just allows you to refer to this specific desire. Okay, and then within this constraint section, you are allowed also to specify hard constraints. So you're allowed to specify hard temporally extended constraint. For example, here a hard constraint is that I never want to hold an explosive object. Okay, and this is a hard constraint here. At most, once I want to be holding a certain object. Kind of a weird one. Okay, so here are more preferences. Maybe this one I put it just because there's a little distinction between putting the quantifiers inside the preference or outside the preferences. I just wanted to show you this because when you put the quantifier outside the preference, you actually define a family of preferences. So the language allows you to define a family of preferences in a rather compact way. For example, here you actually are defining one preference for each package, okay, or one desire for each package. Okay, so these are going to be independent things, one of each other. Okay? If you put the quantifier inside, then it would be only one Boolean preference that will be satisfied completely when all the packages satisfy this property. Okay? And soft goals, you just put the preference inside the goal thing. So here the difference is that this is hard goal and this is soft goal, and the only difference is because this is preceded by the keyword preference, and there's something missing there. Okay, so for those of you, yeah?
Functionally, what's the difference between preferring to ensure each fragile package and preferring to ensure all fragile packages?
Yeah, I'm going to get to that, and the answer is where you define the quality of a plan in terms of a metric function. Okay, and there it will make a difference if you put this inside or outside. Okay. So I'm going to get into that. How many of you are familiar with linear temporal logic? Okay. So if you may have noticed that going this way. Okay. So you may have noticed that this can be expressed using standard linear temporal logic. Okay, and actually the constraints in PDL3 are actually is actually a subset of linear temporal logic. Okay, okay. One important thing is that you can't actually this is a temporal operator. Okay, this is temporal modality, and one limitation of PDL3 is that you can't actually nest these things. Okay, so you can't actually put sometime after inside another, sometime after, or sometime before inside another. Okay, so it's actually a subset of linear temporal logic. So I could go over the details of the semantics, but I'll just go quickly over this. It's possible to define the semantics of the language. You just need, in this case, to define the concept of trajectory, which actually is a representation of what are the states that are traversed by the execution of the plan. So if you execute the plan, you will generate a sequence of states, and if the actions have durations or if time is relevant, each of these states will be associated with some time label. Okay, so this is a trajectory, and the satisfaction of linear temporal logic formula can be expressed, can be defined using this concept of trajectory. Okay, and the way you do that is this one, and I'm not going to go over the details. Maybe only just to show you what are the constructs that are supported by PDL. You can say always something, always some formula, sometimes some formula, sometimes it's like the eventually in linear temporal logic. At some point I want to satisfy something. I want to satisfy something at the end, or sometime after this happens, this has to happen. Sometime before this happens, this has to happen. Okay, so those are the only temporal modalities that are supported by PDL3. Okay, and they cannot be nested. And on top of temporally extended properties, and one nice thing about temporally extended properties is that you actually don't have to refer to real time. I mean, the time is not included in the definition. Okay, and that is nice because people don't like to think about specific time points unless actually you are picky about time. And in that case, you give PDL3 still allows you to refer to time. And for example, here you're talking about each time for each rover you want that always within 10 units of time. If this thing happens, then this other thing has to happen. Okay, so within 10 units of time, whenever this happens, you have to be at the recharging point.
So what does 10 units of time mean? Like 10 actions, or
it's actual time. So you choose your time.
Oh, so it's the durative.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's in the context of durative actions. Yeah. Okay. So so there's two constructs that allow you to refer to time. Okay. Okay. So, and there's also precondition preferences, and I guess Jay also went over this a little bit. And precondition preferences are sort of nice because they allow you to express preferences between actions. And this is also a very natural thing. In some cases, you would like to prefer certain actions in favor of other actions. Okay, so here's a very, very simple example where you have in this gripper domain that someone doesn't like. Two grippers, one small and one large gripper, and you prefer to use this pick with small gripper when the object is actually small or not large, and you prefer to use the other one, the large gripper with large objects. Okay, but that's just a preference. Okay, it's not strict, hard precondition. Okay. Okay, so and this is where so people may be confused to this point. I've been defining what are the desires or what are the preferences in the PDL3 jargon, but I haven't answered the question of when a plan is better than another, and that's the essential question that you need to answer in order to plan in the presence of preferences. So when a plan is better than another is defined by this metric function. Okay. The metric function refers to the preferences that you have declared. So here I have an example where I have 3 preferences. Okay, something very similar to what we've done now. Break, the coffee room, social, be at the coffee room and have coffee, and reviewing, review the paper. Okay? And the metric tells you, talks about these preferences. And so I'm saying here, for example, that in the metric, in this case, works a little bit like a penalty. Okay? Well, works exactly like a penalty here, actually. Okay? So in the preference, in the metric here, you mentioned that is violated reviewing is counted as one thing, and is violated break is counted twice. Okay? This is violated is a function in PDDL3 that is equal to 1 if the preference is violated. It's going to 0 if the preference is satisfied. Okay? And that's in the case of Boolean preferences. Okay? So here, for example, I'm saying that satisfying the social preference is 4 times more important than reviewing the paper first. Okay? Okay. So the is violated. So PDL3 metrics, you have to specify whether or not you're minimizing or maximizing this expression. And the expression is an arbitrary arithmetic formula over these functions. Okay? So it's quite, you can do a lot with these things. Maybe even more than you want to. I mean, you can maximize or minimize. You can obviously go from one to another. And the semantics of the is violated is that if something is a Boolean preference, is violated P is true. Is true. This is exactly the other way around. Okay. So if P is violated, then it should be 1 if the preference is not satisfied by the plan. Okay, and by the trajectory, and it should be 0 otherwise. Okay. And in the case of precondition preferences, actually, whenever you violate a preference during the execution, remember that precondition preferences were these preconditions that are soft. Okay? So whenever you violate one of these preferences, you get the penalty. So you actually increase the number that is returned by the function is violated. So this will return you the number of times the preference is violated in the plan. Okay? And so, for the case that Jordan was wondering about where you have a quantifier outside, because a quantifier outside actually defines a family of preferences, the is violated function actually refers to a family of preferences. So it will count actually the number of preferences that are satisfied. I omitted this from the, it's a little bit of a detail. But it will count if the quantifier is outside. For each of the blocks, it will behave like sort of a counter. Okay? But if you put the quantifier inside, it will just behave like one single Boolean formula. Okay? Okay, so that's the thing. As I said, with PDL3 metrics you can do a lot, and actually you probably can do more than it's reasonable to do. For example, you can define mean problems actually with this, or problems that really don't make much sense, or they're pretty unnatural. For example, in this case, you can in this example define a problem in which the more you violate a preference, the better your plan gets. Okay? So for example, just take the same example of the small gripper, and if your metric is to maximize the is violated small, then whatever your hard goal is, well, satisfy your hard goal, and then keep on violating your preference, and your metric will increase and increase, and therefore you get a better plan. Okay, so it allows you to do strange things. Okay, so maybe PDL3 metrics are a little bit too expressive. Okay, so I'll tell you about the competition. The competition had for which PDL3 was defined had 3 tracks: simple preferences, qualitative preferences, and metric preferences. The qualitative preference name here is kind of strange to me because, as you've seen, the quality of a plan is defined in terms of this function, which returns a number, actually. So I don't see actually a lot of qualitative preferences here, although there's a different way of interpreting this, which could lead you to think that this is okay. So simple preferences, just soft goals and precondition preferences. Qualitative preferences, did simple preferences plus temporally extended preferences, and metric preferences did qualitative plus temporal preferences. Okay? There were, I don't know how many competitors in this category. UHMPS was one of them.
Maybe 6XL was another.
Maybe 3 more. Yeah. Something similar in the qualitative preference track. And not very many here, actually only one, I think. Or 2, maybe 2. Yeah. And so the winner in all these tracks was SG Plan 5. Okay. We're not going to discuss SG Plan 5 in a lot of detail because since we've learned that actually SG Plan 5 ignores the metric function. So it doesn't really use the information in the preferences to actually find a plan, but it selects the preferences to achieve at the outset. So before starting to plan, it will select which preferences to satisfy, and then plan for these preferences. But there's no details in the literature about this algorithm, so we don't really know what actually was going on there.
Can you develop parallel plans since you have temporal constraints here?
Yeah, and actually, if you go back to the definition of the trajectory, there's no need that actually, just in the trajectory, there's these pairs state time, right? There's no need that these state time, the time always increases. It could be that you're allowed to execute a bunch of actions in parallel. Okay, so we're not going to discuss that in detail, but we are going to discuss some other approaches to planning with PDL3 preferences, and basically the approach is it's a compilation approach. There were 3 planners that competed in the qualitative preference track that were using compilation approaches. And the compilation approach is basically getting rid of the temporally extended formulas and transforming them into just simple softcodes. Okay. And one good reason to do that is that after you do that, you can use heuristics that exist and that are sort of well understood, and you would try to you can either use them or modify them because now you're dealing with standard elements. Okay. It's kind of.
Just want to make sure I understand the compilation approach are not guaranteed to achieve the optimal results, right?
I'm going to talk about one planner that allows you to
compile our yet still preserve the optimality of the final.
Yeah. It will find optimal solutions actually. Okay. So. I'm going to describe a little bit the compilation technique that we used in HPlanP, which was a planner that entered the qualitative track of this competition and got the distinguished award. And a very similar technique was used in these other 2 planners that also got into the competition, and in particular, this one is optimal. Okay. So. So the HPlanP only handles discrete domains, so there's no actual time handled in the planner. It does not generate a parallel plan, so you will see just a linear plan as an output. And it handles trajectory preferences and hard constraints, and it actually handles constraints in which you can actually nest the temporal operators. And it also handles preconditions and goal preferences. And it's incremental. It will produce a sequence of plans with increasing or improving metric value, which you could guess after this that the planner is actually not optimal, but it will produce this sequence. Okay. This all works. So we actually, what we did here was propose this compilation where we get rid of the temporally extended goals, and then use or adapt classical heuristics for this problem. So Jay already discussed this a little bit. This is just a repeat of that. This is the planning graph, relaxed planning graph. And what we tried to do here is was to use the structure in order to design heuristics for planning with preferences. Okay, okay, and that's the main idea. And the approach is the following: we take a PDL3 problem with temporally extended preferences and temporally extended hard constraints, and we represent the preferences as parameterized, non-deterministic finite state automata. Okay, we use some concepts known from verification, in which it's been known for for a number of years that you can check the satisfaction of a temporal formula using an automaton. Okay, so what we actually do here is that we generate an automaton that represents exactly when a temporal formula is satisfied, and we use this representation in order to compile away the temporally extended preferences. And we generate this new domain with the automaton encoded inside it. And we propose heuristics. So here's the main idea. It's actually, well, it's quite simple in the end if you just ignore how you generate this. Okay, so the thing that you would have to believe me is that whenever you give me a temporally extended formula, I can tell you how to generate an automaton such that the automaton will reach a final state or an accepting state when it processes a plan that satisfies the constraint. Okay, so the plan. So if you give the automaton the sequence of states visited by the plan, the automaton will accept if and only if the temporal formula is satisfied by the trajectory you've given to the automaton. Okay, okay. So this entity here can be used to check this property, and what you can do is once you know that this entity can be used for that, you can just think that this is like part of your domain. So what I'm saying here is that you always can construct this object that will be able to test whether or not the property is true. Okay? But the same object can be modeled inside the planning domain. Okay? And that's the key point. So this thing, which is an accessory that you could use to check or not the validity of a function, can be modeled inside the domain. Like if you take the automaton and just plug it in here. I could have modeled this domain, and I can just take the automaton and assume that it's something that lives in the domain. Okay, and you can do that by expressing when the automaton will be in each of the possible states. So for each of the possible states, you have a predicate that tells you whether or not the automaton is in the state.
Once you've satisfied your hard constraints, are you going to then do a search to optimize your soft constraints?
I'm going to get into that, and so the answer is yes. Yeah. So and once you do that, you can define the updates of the predicates in a way that I'm not going to describe in detail. But here you can see that there are these predicates that actually refer to the automaton. So I have this predicate outstate Q0x, which means that basically the object x is in state Q0. Okay?
Okay. Isn't there an exponential blow-up?
Yeah, in the worst case there is one. Yeah, yeah. Although if you just restrict to PDL3, which is limited because you can't nest things, then you can still blow up the representation if you're not smart, but you can avoid it easily. So, for example, if you have sometime something, sometime something else, okay. If you pass that to the algorithm and don't preprocess anything, it will. But you can do something. I mean, you can preprocess the domain in order to avoid the blow up in many cases. Okay, and here we define a bunch of heuristics. I'm not going to go into the details of them, but I'm just going to tell you the important things, which are the main intuitions. Of course, if you're trying to solve these problems, we want to always satisfy your goal. So to solve these problems, we have a heuristic that allows you to guide, that guides you towards the goal, which is kind of obvious. Then you want to satisfy preference that are highly valued. And of course, we're going to use a heuristic that guides you to satisfying preference that have a high value in the metric function. But you don't want to get obsessed with preferences that are or that look too hard. One of the problems, one of the main challenges in the problems that were designed for this competition was that actually there were some preferences that were really hard to achieve. Okay, so if a preference is really hard to achieve, but it has a real high value, one of your important resources here starts to be your actual time to compute the plan. Okay, that's a resource that is not included in the measure function, but that exists somehow. Yeah. So of course you don't want to search forever for something that is really hard to achieve. Hard to achieve means, for example, just imagine a preference that takes a couple of thousand actions to be achieved. If you're using a relaxation that ignores a lot of things, you may see that it's hard, but you may be quite wrong about the hardness of the preference, and you don't want to be caught into that. And we have heuristics that deal with that. Okay, I'm not going to go into details. Here's this discounted metric that actually doesn't evaluates the metric in each of these relaxed worlds and sort of discounts the value of things that look too hard. So when something really looks too hard, the discounted metric, which is a heuristic, will sort of play this down. I don't really believe that these things are going to be achieved that soon. So it just sort of discounts it. It discounts them by a factor that it's not greater than 1. Okay. You want to satisfy your preference goals. We had this other preference distance function that we actually adapted from a paper by Sue and Given, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. It is similar to the function g, which measures the distance to the goal, but it's talking about distance to the preferences. So the intuition about this is just basically, let's think that we are going to achieve all preferences and just sum up try to construct, basically, is similar to constructing a relaxed plan where you actually want to achieve everything. Okay? Okay, this is sort of the idea of this preference, the heuristic. Okay? Okay, and now how will we do the algorithm? The algorithm is and we had a couple of other metrics that were used to prune. Okay? Our algorithm is an incremental algorithm, and we'll find a solution, and once it has found a solution, we'll search for another solution. Okay, and once you've found one solution, you obviously want to use some information from the previous solution. The information we're using from the previous solution is the metric function of the previous solution, and we have these two estimations, two heuristic values that actually allow you to prune the space after one solution has been found. So we're using a branch and bound algorithm, and these two functions are used to prune. Okay, I'm not going to go into the details. And how are our heuristics? Our heuristics are prioritizations of heuristic estimates. I told you I want to satisfy the goal, I want to satisfy the preferences, blah blah. There are these several heuristics, and our planner used a sequence of these heuristics and decided between two states which one is better by just using a lexicographic comparison, basically. So the first priority is given by the goal distance, and the second priority by some heuristic that talks about preferences, and the third priority by some other heuristic that refers to preferences. Okay, and in our approach, we always use G first. So the goal distance was always at the very top priority. Okay, so we wanted to achieve the goal. Okay. Okay, and then when best plan is found with metric M, then we prune away all the states whose B value is worse than M. Okay, and B is one of these estimators of the best metric value you can obtain when you visit a state. Okay, we output a plan when the metric value is better than the one found so far, and we execute until the search space is empty. Okay, so this is basically a best first search algorithm with branch and branch pruning. Okay, this is just as simple as that. And the only important thing is that the heuristic is not just one value, but it's this tuple of values. Okay, when the first priority is the goal, and the second and third, whatever, fourth if you want, are heuristics that refer to the preferences. Okay, that's basically the idea. And we tried a lot. It was hard at the beginning to see try to guess which of these heuristics was going to be better. We tried a lot of these values, and one of the most important things that we learned is that if you use, so here we tried all these heuristics over the domains that were used in the combinations. It's interesting that the worst heuristic overall was the one that actually thinks that can achieve all the preferences. Okay, so if you sort of do the relaxed plan and think that you can achieve everything and use the length of the relaxed plan that achieves everything as a heuristic, it turns out that it behaved worse than all the other more even crazier heuristics that we came up with. So sort of a summary here is that in many of the domains, the good ones start with D, and D is one that is this discounted metric. Okay, that is the heuristic that sort of included this notion that things that are hard to achieve, I'm not going to believe them so much. I'm going to think that the metric that I'm going to be more conservative about the metric, the potential of the state, being not believing so much about preferences that are far away. And in many of the in some of the domains, the pruning that is carried out by the branch and bound algorithm is essential. In OpenStax, actually, is the only way you actually can improve the first plan. And here, for example, we're showing in how many instances we were able to find more than one plan. Okay, so in OpenStax, we always found more than one plan for each of the instances. Okay, and the only way we could actually do this was by using the pruning technique. If we turned off pruning, then we wouldn't find any better solutions after finding one.
Did I understand that earlier statistic to mean that a hard constraint was worth about 3 times as much as a soft constraint?
No. Actually, hard constraints here are just simply hard constraints. Okay, so the planner, as it plans, if there's a temporally extended constraint that is violated, actually will prune away that state. So it will not continue planning if you violate a constraint while you're constructing your solution. Okay, and you are actually planning for hard goals. So hard goals are actually have to be achieved by any planner.
I guess I'm missing something. I thought PO meant that the worst thing is to enforce all of the constraints.
Oh yeah, no. What this means is that your heuristic, you're taking as a heuristic value a heuristic that will think that your goal is actually that your goal is totally hard. I mean that you want to satisfy everything. That's the idea. So your heuristic, if you plan using this heuristic that thinks that everything is hard, turned out to be the worst thing to do.
Oh, okay, but you still end up satisfying all the hard constraints.
Yeah.
Oh, even though that's not your heuristic. Okay.
Yeah. The heuristic is the heuristic. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So that's what H+B did. The other 2 competitors in the same track did something similar in terms of compiling away preferences. It's basically a very similar idea, where the only difference is that this approach needed to ground all the preferences. We didn't need to do that. MIPS BDD uses cost optimal blind search, so there's no heuristic involved, but find optimal solutions. And on the other hand, MIPS XXL iteratively This is kind of recursive. This is not true. So iteratively invokes a version of metric FF, actually, metric FF, that uses this extended memory in disk. This is kind of a neat idea. The idea here is that it will call FF to find one plan. It will it will just invoke FF with the hard goals, okay, and will find a plan with some metric value, and then add an additional constraint to the plan problem that says that the solution that you want has a metric value that is higher than the one you already found, and then invokes FF again. Okay, so it just runs the FF planner from scratch all over again. Okay, imposing a stricter requirement on the metric value that is found. Right? This is actually the same idea that these other guys had around the same years. It's funny because these people and myself had the idea of compiling away temporally extended formulas using big automaton sort of at the same time, and these guys also had the same idea of these guys of invoking FF iteratively with increasing the requirements on the metric function. Okay. Okay, so although, and what is important to this point is that although PDL3 is this language that has all these elements that let you talk about temporal relationship between events and seems to be very complicated, there's still approaches that enable you to, take this problem that seems to use a very expressive language and just map it into something that is simpler. Okay, I'm going to skip the UH and DS, and basically this means that if you have a problem with PDL3 preferences, temporally extended preferences, temporally extended hard constraints, you can using our approach you can transform it into a problem with just soft goals and conditional costs and hard goals too. Okay. And using the approach that Jay explained, you can of course convert this into a problem with only hard goals, and then you can use the planner view. Then you can use a cost-based planner, the best state-of-the-art planner you can find. And the question I had made the slides before the discussion that Jay had with you guys at the beginning, if that is this approach a reasonable approach, and I'm not convinced.
Why not?
And the reason is that I'm pretty sure that if you take the problems that have been compiled, domain-independent heuristics designed for classical planning, in which all goals are hard, may return heuristic values that have nothing to do with what you're actually trying to do. Remember this for go and collect, or claim, for go and claim. Who knows what the relaxed plan extraction algorithm will do with that? I'm not sure if just using the FF heuristic with a compiled problem will give you a reasonable solution. And so that's one thing. And the other intuition, which is just an intuition, is that in these problems sometimes it's not only important to estimate the quality, like all these heuristics that I mentioned to you are heuristics that are actually trying to estimate the metric value of a solution. That's the thing you want to optimize for, and that's why you actually are trying to estimate that. But there's something important also, which is search effort. One thing could be, one important thing is how good you can get from this state, and the other thing is how hard it is to get there. Okay, in classical planning, it's usually the case that search effort and solution quality are two things that are pretty much related.
With uniform cost action.
Yeah. So here, it's not clear to me that heuristic that just takes these problems are going to balance well these two things. That's the other intuition.
Mhm.
So that's why for me it's not clear.
I guess it's possible to have automatically preserving translation for the first arrow, but it's impossible to have a automatic preserving translation in the worst case for the second arrow. Is that correct?
No, I don't think that's correct.
No, the soft code compilation does
Yeah.
preserve tonality.
Yeah, I think so.
So from the second one to the third one,
Yeah.
it's also
Yeah.
so both arrows are possible to have.
The optimal plan for the problem with hard goals gives the optimal net benefit for the soft goals. I'm not saying it's fine.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to start talking about something else. Okay, so Jordan again had a question about balancing the costs between I don't remember what you said, achieving units of gas and something else. Okay, and that's actually a problem. People don't really feel like converting everything to a single unit. Although my friends that are experts in economy tell me that everything can be mapped into the dollars. I don't think people like to do that, at least. Okay, although it may be possible, but people don't like to do that, and people don't think it that way.
I was just wondering, does it really matter that people don't like doing that if they're doing it anyway?
Yeah. but they're doing it wrong. Really, they're doing experiments.
No, I mean, you as the extractor of the mapping may be doing things wrong, but I mean, people, if you ask people, maybe they'll do it wrong, but if you design tests, I mean, essentially, if you try to devise a test that will implicitly derive that knowledge, then sort of, so why does it essentially matter that people don't want to do this?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I guess the only answer I have for this is that it is you may be able to just write a language. I mean, you may be able to present a language that is qualitative in nature, and that people would actually find it easier to use. Just simple as that. And I'm going to be describing two languages that are qualitative, and well, we'll see if it seems reasonable in the end. Okay, and we can, I guess we can discuss such words. Okay, so both partial satisfaction planning and PDL3 assign you define the quality of a plan in terms of a numeric function. Okay, and you compare two plans in terms of the result that this function returns on the plan. Okay, but arguably, and this is the thing motivating this part, for humans it's easier to express preferences in a qualitative way. For example, I prefer a plan where I drink red rather than white wine, or I'd rather go to the movies than not. Okay, just simple as that. Okay. Assuming I have these two qualitative preferences, I prefer, again, red wine over white wine and going to the movies than not. Then if I just, do it very simply, I get to the first problem is how to integrate these two things. Okay? And Brau was mentioning something about this at the beginning. So what if I prefer red to white, and I prefer going to the movies than not going to the movies. So which of these two plans I prefer? A plan where I have white wine and I go to the movies, or a plan where I have red wine and I don't go to the movies? If you go to Pareto optimality, then maybe they're equally good. And in just assuming that you can't satisfy both preferences at the same time, but in terms of common sense, it may not even make sense to use these two preferences at the same time. It seems that this preference is talking about more of having food, and this preference has nothing to do with food. So it may be that a user actually wants to combine these things in a more expressive way. Okay, so how is it possible to do that? And that's sort of the theme of this part. Okay. So there are a number of qualitative languages that have been used in planning. I should say here more than CPNets, actually TCPNets, which are the ones that we are going to discuss, that are based on CPNets. There's this temporal preference framework by the Grand and colleagues that is actually really nice. It allows you to generate temporal preferences. There's also this other language PP by Son and Pentelli, and LPP by Bienvenu and colleagues. And we are going to talk about these two, and actually TCPNets, not CPNets. And this one here, this one, LPP, is an extension of PP. So that's why we're not talking about PP. And temporal preference framework, it's a little bit similar to LPP in a way because they also allow temporal formulas. So we're not going to go into those details. Okay, so we're going to describe TCP nets and one planner for TCP nets, which is PrefPlan, and then LPP. Okay. And same thing, we're going to cover one of the planners for PP. Okay, so this is a standard example for CPNets. Anyone not familiar with CPNets? Everyone's familiar with CPNets? Okay, so CPNets is it's a compact graphical representation for preferences. It allows you to express preferences between sets of assignments to variables in a compact way by defining these conditional preference tables. Okay, so in sort of the same spirit as Bayesian networks allow you to represent a conditional probability distribution in a compact way, this is actually a very similar thing. Okay, so here, for example, you have two variables that can take each of them two values. And this is actually S, this variable X, can take value F and V, and S is like the kind of soup I'm eating, and W is the one I'm taking, okay? So SF, fish and veggie, and white wine and red wine. So this thing here says that unconditionally I prefer to have fish soup over veggie soup, okay? So this is unconditional, just like in Bayesian networks, the variables that don't have predecessors are conditioned. Okay, and here variable W is conditioned on the value of the predecessor. So I prefer, this is kind of obvious, I prefer white wine over red wine if I'm having a fish soup, and the other way around if I'm having veggie soup. Okay? Okay, so as you can see, well, this somehow looks like pretty natural in terms of preference. You could, well, one can think that this can clearly be used to represent preferences over goal states. Okay, you know, in planning we have these states, and states are collections of propositions, and you can define which states you prefer to other states using this representation. Okay, what's the meaning of each of these statements? Basically, that you prefer states where if this thing is true in a particular state, then you will prefer a state that has this value rather than this value, all other things being equal. Okay, and this is the Ketteris Paribus criteria that is used here. Okay, so if you compare two states, okay, you will say that imagine that in these two states SF, you can only compare. So by the way, you can only compare two states if they differ in the value that they assign to this. I mean, if you want to use this rule to compare two states, you can only compare them if they differ in the value of W. Everything else has to be equal. Okay, and you will say that something is better than the other. Well, depending on this relation here. Okay. So using these rules, you can determine which states are preferred. Is that okay? Okay. Okay, but this one is not actually the formalism that has been used in the planner. What they have used actually is these other formalism called TCP nets. TCP nets adds one important kind of one very important element to CP nets, and its importance. Okay, They allow representing importance between variables. So, and this has to do again with the example I gave at the beginning. So in some cases it might be more important to satisfy a certain preference. For example, today I wanted to go for lunch and I wanted to just eat something. That was my hard goal, and I prefer to be done early because I wanted to discuss the tutorial. Right? That was kind of a preference. And then I also had food preferences, but I prefer to have salad rather than something else. But clearly, the most important preference was time. Okay, so it's I mean, I guess very obvious to people that there's sometimes preferences that are things that are more important, and TCP nets allow you to represent things that are more important. And so, on top of the traditional relations, there are these importance statements. Here we have one, here we have another one. And this basically says, whenever P1 and P2 are true, then P3 is going to be more important than P4. Okay? So if this happens, then I could think that if I wanted to compare two things, then I'm going to just focus on P3. And only if I have a tie, then I'm going to look at P4. Okay? But I'm just going to decide on P3 as a first priority. Okay? So that's sort of the main idea. If you wanted to compare two outcomes, actually, the definition is it's that you allow actually to vary now the value of two values, the value of two variables. Okay, but anyway, so here there's an example where only because P3 is more important than P4, and then because P1 and P2 is true, then use the statement here, and P3 is more important than P4, so because P3 here is true and P4 here is false, you choose this one. Because here P3 is preferred to be not P3. Okay? So you just take into account this guy here. Okay? Because P3 is more important. Okay? So this is reasonably, this is something reasonable you can do for planning with temporally, planning with TCP nets. Okay, and so there's this planner, pref plan, by Brefman and Czerniawski, that it's basically something that is similar to what Jay was mentioning the session, the first session, where he discussed this approach that they were using sort of MathSat for solving PESB problems. Here, what you do is that you translate the problem into a constraint satisfaction problem. Okay, and the idea is just I summarize the idea in just this line. Once you encode the problem into a constraint satisfaction problem, you're just going to try the most preferred solution first. Okay, so you're going to make sure that your constraint satisfaction problem will assign the variables, the goal variables that are involved in the preferences, in a way that it will try the most preferred options first. Okay, it will start, and that is something you can do just by looking at the structure of the TCP net. The details of this don't come actually from this work, and actually I mean from the work of from the planner, but come from the original paper, I believe, which is basically how to enumerate, how to construct sequences of outcomes that are preferred to other sequences. And basically what this does is that it runs so it generates an n-bounded CSP representation of the problem, and it solves the CSP using a specific variable like domain ordering. Okay? And that's basically the idea. So we'll choose variables that have no predecessors in the TCP net, and this is the way you actually do it when you want to generate most preferred outcomes. And you let the solver choose the variables that are not mentioned in the goal and that are not mentioned in the preference in the way. And then the values of the variables are chosen according to the preferences, which is natural. Right? So in the example where we have the fish soup that is preferred to the other soup, what this planner would do would try to find a plan where I get to eat fish soup first. Okay, if that doesn't happen, well, that cannot be achieved, then we'll try the other assignment, etc. Okay, so that's the idea. And so one important thing here is that this thing will find plans that are bounded and bounded. So you choose the bound n is given as an argument to the algorithm. So we'll find an optimal plan. Actually, it's can be proven that prep plan is sound, complete, and Pareto optimal. I added the word bounded. That was not mentioned in the paper, but that's actually obviously true. Pareto optimal, but bounded to whatever the argument given, the number given as argument is equal to. Okay. Okay. Is that clear?
I'm not sure what Pareto bounded optimal means. I mean, the bounded optimal is usually when you have one number.
So it's the Pareto optimal among all the possible plans that are bounded by n.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I used the correct order, but yeah, Pareto bounded optimal without dash. Oh, maybe there. Whatever. Okay. Yeah?
Yeah.
Is it correct? Okay. Good. So that's the idea of TCP nets. Planning with LPP. LPP is another language that allows you. So something important and something that is known of TCP nets and CP nets is that these networks define orderings between states, and the ordering is it's an order. It's going to be a consistent order if this. I believe that the theorem is that if this is acyclic, then the order is going to be consistent, but that doesn't actually guarantee that any possible pair of states is comparable. In some cases, you can't actually compare these two pairs of states. Okay, so actually here we allow incomparability. LPP is another language where you actually all plans are going to be comparable. Okay. For some acknowledgments to these guys who actually collaborated with a couple of 3-4 slides for this talk. So I have another example. This is the dinner example in their paper. It's dinner time. Claire is tired and hungry. Her goal is to be at home with her hunger sated. So it's the same example I had, but a little bit different. There are 3 possible ways to get for Claire to get food. Cook at home, order takeout, or go to a restaurant. Okay, and so Claire has preferences over types of food. Prefers to eat pizza over spaghetti, and spaghetti over the crepes. Okay, and prefers, because she's tired, she prefers takeout to cooking at home. If she had the necessary ingredients, and she prefers this to going out to a restaurant. Okay, and prefers cooking to takeout and takeout to a restaurant. It's sometimes the same thing, right? I rewrote it and I didn't delete it. For that. Okay, so we have the language for preferences is actually rather, I would say, a little bit complicated. Okay. But basically they have one single element that is very similar to PDL3 preferences, which they call basic desire formulas. That's why I like to call the other ones desire formulas too. They have these atomic preference formulas and the general preference formulas. We'll see through examples. I don't actually want you to understand all the details. It's just the examples that I think are the most valuable here. So these desire formulas are actually temporally extended formulas. Okay, these are just like the PDL3 formulas, nothing new actually. Yeah, there's only one thing that is kind of nice, and it's that you are allowed to talk about the occurrence of actions. Okay, so in your formula you can talk about things that happen, actions that happen, which is of course also natural. You sometimes may want to have some certain actions included. Okay. And then you have the atomic preference formulas that have this syntax form, which I don't think you will kind of digest at this time of the day. Too late. So I'll show you an example. And it's very simple. Here you have the example. You may remember that she preferred to eat pizza rather than pasta, over pasta, and pasta over salad. And so you actually, what you do here is that this formula expresses the preferences in that way, and you associate each of these VDFs here, each of the desires, with some value of satisfaction. Okay? And these values of satisfactions are not numeric necessarily, and are taken from a set that is predefined, a set of values. So here I'm assuming that this is the set, and to confuse you more, I turned around all the preferences. Well, actually I'm using the original orderings. It turns out that some people like to use less than or greater than to say that it's preferred or less preferred. Well, I don't know. Anyway, so best here is obviously the best option. Okay. And then there's another one that preferred restaurant rather than takeout. So order restaurant is the best, and order takeout is only okay. And so you have these two things that are independent preferences, and something that I told you at the beginning that is essential here is that you would like to combine these things. And this language allows you to combine these things using generalized preference formulas, which actually allow you to talk about conjunction, disjunction, and conditional things on preferences. So for example, at the very beginning I had this example about preferences on wine and preferences of going to the movies, and I told you maybe for different problems these things have nothing to do with each other. So maybe it depends on the goal I'm planning for, what preferences I want to use. So that would mean that probably you want to specify your preferences in a conditional way. Okay? So saying, well, I prefer this thing to that thing, but only if this is true in my planning problem. For example, if I'm planning for food, then it makes sense to talk about wine. Okay? So it allows you to talk about conditional things and conjunction and disjunction. I'm not going to go into the details, only to show you an example again with the preference that I defined before. Pizza over pasta, pasta over salad again. And so you have this condition of this form of combining thing by using conjunctions, and in the conjunctions you will actually do the following. You will, if you want to compare two plans, you will evaluate each of the formulas in each of the plans, and while you evaluate this, you will obtain a certain value. So for example, on one plan when you eat pizza, you will obtain best here. Okay, and in a plan where you order takeout, you will obtain okay here. Okay, and the and here means that you'll take the minimum value among those two. Okay, so and always the minimum value. So order takeout pasta will only be okay. Well, eat pasta at the restaurant will be really good. Okay, use that definition. And they have the or, which is sort of very similar, but instead of taking the min, it takes the max. Okay, so their order takeout pasta will be really good, but eat pasta at the restaurant will be best. Okay, and the intuition here is that you don't care that much about satisfying both preferences at the same time, but you have actually a disjunction. So it's mostly about satisfying any of those. If you satisfy any of those, the max value is the one that is returned.